Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. While rushing to a call, an ambulance doctor taught the buggers a lesson on the road and went to jail. And when he came to get the documents, MP4, yes, and into a can of beer. John went home. His heart felt anxious and heavy. He knew what his wife Betty would say when once again you hear this at a reasonable premium. Hi. She met him on the threshold of the apartment. Why so quiet? I wish she was at work today. John thought, and with a sigh, answered, I got my paycheck. So, did you get fined again? My wife grinned. I didn't doubt it. Take your clothes off and eat. I have to pay the mortgage again. She grumbled, going to her room. I didn't do it on purpose, of course. You don't change your job on purpose. Everything else happens by accident. John, I'm tired. I can't stand to see you wasting your time and your health in that damn ambulance. You're always there on weekends and holidays. They can even call you in from vacation. It's like living without a husband. Honestly, you can't go. You can't go anywhere with your paycheck. You're afraid to buy popcorn at the movies because you won't be able to live on it. Your classmate, Jacob, by the way, has a smaller job at the private clinic, and he makes more money. He and Ginny go to the seaside every year, saving up for a house. He gives her gold rings with diamonds. He bought a mink coat for New Year's Eve. And all you do is work at a loss. Why would you do that? You know I love my job and want to help people for a pittance, his wife interrupted. Why do not you help in a private clinic? Drunkards are more interesting to deal with than normal people. You do not understand, of course. How could I? The ways of altruists are unexplainable to me. I could get more money to take care of my family. Change my rusty car. Live like normal people. What are you going to do? Get pennies with everybody. You don't think about anybody but yourself. And I want kids, by the way, not at 30 or 40, but now while I'm 25. At least one. And what about kids when we're in debt like Silk? John went over to his wife and hugged her. What's the matter with you? I don't make that much money. Just below the city average. So live off your average until you retire. I'm sick of it, Betty said, pulling out a suitcase from the mezzanine. Are you going out? In confused voice, John asked. Yes. Grabbing his spouse, he said, I'm not letting you go anywhere. Betty, please understand me, but it's not mine. It's sitting in cubicles and filling up plans to Jacob-Babel patients, cheating people by prescribing unnecessary paid for tests. I can't do that. But you can work for a pittance. Keep up the good work, Betty said, pulling out of his grasp and continuing to pack her things. Do push-ups in the morning on the bar, pull-ups to carry all those drunken layoffs on a stretcher to the car. I'm going to my mom's. I'm sick of putting up with all this. You start earning like Jacob, I'll be back. Betty, I ain't Jacob. I can't do that. If I leave, who's gonna save people? Who would save you from divorce? Do you want a divorce? Not yet. But if you're going to keep living like this, expect a letter from the court in a couple of months, said the wife, and took her suitcase and left the apartment. John ran after her to the elevator. Wait a minute. You know, this job is my life. I can't give it all up just for the money. Don't you know what it's like to be able to save someone at the last minute, to save them from death? People thank me, you see, they give me gifts. Let me know when, besides Cognis and candy, they'll start paying your mortgage as president or give you a decent car instead of a gas-guzzling Ford, said Betty, and stepped into the elevator cab. Goodbye, lifeguard. 2 weekends passed in binges. Betty didn't answer her texts or phone calls, demanded not to disturb her. John was bored, asked to understand him. back to dinner adamantly stood her ground. He should change jobs first. Realizing he wanted to keep his family together, John began looking at job openings at local private clinics. Waking up for work at 600 hours, he felt a headache. After taking a pill, he began exercising and making himself breakfast. The new shift in the ambulance promised to be difficult. The emergency room doctor had torn his back and asked John to fill in for her. First call was to the scene of an accident. A girl had driven into a guardrail. She suffered an open arm fracture and was unconscious herself. Realizing that the situation was serious and there was a morning traffic jam, John advised Alexander, the driver of their car, to drive to the scene of the accident in the backyards. It was literally 5 minutes to their destination. When the road was blocked by 2 foreign cars with their emergency lights, the young car owners were talking with their windows down and were in no hurry to leave. Alexander turned on the horn. Ignoring him, the boys continued their conversation. What he saw made John furious. As a doctor, he knew every minute could be crucial. Getting out of the car, John walked over to the foreign car on the left that was blocking the road the most. Tapping on the roof, he asked, "Please make way for the ambulance." We rushed to the scene of the accident. The driver there is unconscious and needs medical attention. Every minute counts. "We're in a hurry, too," replied the blonde, skinned owner of the foreign car, smiling defiantly. "Can't help it, didn't notice. It's not the first minute, we're behind you. So why are you standing there? Take a detour if you're so pressed for time. There's a traffic jam right now. We'll lose 20 minutes. Please give way," said John, trying again to keep his composure. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm waiting for her. She should be getting out any minute. Why do you keep doing this? Drive around. You're required by law to give way to an ambulance. If the horn is on, get lost." We don't live by the law in this country. Unable to contain his anger any longer, John grabbed the guy by the collar, pulled him to him and said, "Move your car now before I break your face." Not so fast. The driver of the second foreign car intervened in the conversation. "Do you even know who the doctor is going after?" "I don't care who the president is. There's a man dying there. Get the cars out of the way." "Archie, that doctor is stupid." "Call your daddy," said the blond man to his comrade, and wrenched himself out of John's hands and pulled a pepper spray from the glove compartment. Seeing this, he took the owner of the car by the ear, pulled it out of the window and said, "You try to use that, and I'll bury you right here. Drop it." The cheeky man obediently threw the object on the second seat and now slowly drive the car behind me. "I'll pull your ear in the right direction. Drive off after me." "Give him a punch in the jaw," Archie shouted. "What's the point? I went to boxing when I was a kid." "So you're Austin, huh?" John said. "That's what Austin is. Don't listen to your friend, you'll be safer. And it'll take you longer to fight than it does to pull away." The cocky fellow, taken by the ear, listened to the doctor and slowly moved his car in front of his car, in front of his comrade's car. "That's all. Thank you. Now at least you can wait till morning for whoever you want," John said, and went back to the car. "What a hero you are today," Alexander told him with a smile. "They've got a nerve. They see the ambulance coming, and no matter what. And what if one of their relatives or friends had an accident? They don't get into accidents. They were born with immortality," the driver joked. When John arrived on the scene, he quickly assessed the girl's condition and began administering first aid. His paramedic partner discovered an open arm fracture and applied a makeshift splint to fix the broken limb and prevent further tissue damage. Together they placed the girl on a stretcher to carry her to the car. "She lost a lot of blood," John said. "I hope she makes it." The victim opened her eyes for a second and looked at him, then lost consciousness again. "If that major had moved faster, this wouldn't have happened," the paramedic remarked. "The stupidity of people sometimes amazes me." When they arrived at the hospital, John informed the trauma surgeon of the patient's condition. He returned to the car with joy and a sense of accomplishment. A life had been saved. The last thing John expected was to go to jail for his actions. It turns out that the owner of the foreign car, Austin, whom he had forced to move the car out of the way, he was the son of Oliver, a well-known banker in the area. After chatting with him, Archie, the child of local prosecutor Wilson, unknown, which of the two decided to complain about John's actions to his parents after all? The result was not long in coming. Austin accuses you of torturing him with threats and insulting his person for your own benefit. That's 3 articles of the criminal code. If the victim wins the case, you're in big trouble. What can you do against that? Asked the free lawyer given to him. I mean, they must have deft footage that proves it. The guys say the memory card was full and there's no recording. Conveniently thought of. No argument there. Some of what I said could have been construed as a threat. But I just took Austin by the ear while he was sitting in the car and told him to follow me to get the car out of the way. Is that torture? His buddy next to him testified against you, saying that you threatened and physically abused Austin to make him give way, that you would ask for the ambulance video recorder. You will see for yourself that no such thing happened. John told the lawyer his version of what had happened and asked to bring Alexander into the case as a witness. After listening to his client, the lawyer assured him that the case would not be difficult to win. It was difficult to sleep in terrible conditions in the general cell of the detention facility, with many people sleeping on bunk beds 2 levels side by side. And all around there was a terrible stench which John had never encountered even when he came to the dormitory for calls to alcoholics. On the appointed day, he sat on a bench in the courtroom with his hands tied. John was sure of his innocence, but still worried. It was unlikely that the banker's son had simply decided to scare him. Parents of both boys were present in the courtroom and looked at him contemptuously. Betty didn't come to support her spouse. John's mother watched her son with bated breath, awaiting the court's verdict. Next to her, hugging her shoulders, sat his father. John looked into their eyes, trying to assure them without words that everything would be okay. But inside, his heart clenched treacherously with terror. It was frightening to imagine that he might go to jail for his correct actions. When testifying, Austin lied and confused his words so much that John almost laughed. As a defendant, he and Alexander appeared confident before the judges. When it already seemed that the case had been won, Archie's lawyer came out and said, "Notice, Your Honor, how terrified my client is at the presence of this fiend in a white coat. He can't concentrate from the horror he has experienced." John's colleague claims that Austin did not want to miss the ambulance, deliberately ignoring that both cars had activated the emergency signal and thus could not drive and were waiting for a tow truck. By his stubbornness, John simply forced my client to risk his prized possessions, instead of heeding and taking a different road to the call, as he was told to do. The recording from the ambulance's DVR proves it. What he heard angered John. "Your Honor, there was never any question of a tow truck. Did Austin tell me he was expecting a girl?" "You need to remain silent. We have heard your side of the story," the judge replied, and again gave the floor to counsel. After a recess, the court announced the verdict. John was found guilty of the crimes and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He could hardly believe his ears. His mother cried. John decided not to give up and appeal the sentence. However, nothing could be changed. Remembering his wife's requests to change jobs, he suddenly thought he should have listened to her. Who knows? Maybe a private clinic would have saved him from the bitter fate of the prisoner. Realizing that he would never be able to do what he loved, John sank into depression. Ahead of him awaited a prison in which he could not hope to meet anything good. Before the detention center and prison, it seemed to John that the worst attitude he saw was the ingratitude and boorishness of people while working in the... It wasn't until he became an inmate that he saw the treatment much worse. For 2 days he had to ride in the wagons without a chance to sleep or go to the bathroom. There was only bread and herring as food. When he got there, he was greeted by the newcomers, and the other prisoners were terrified and threatening. No one spoke to anyone in a human way. The prisoners were shouted at with foul language, and the guards used force at the slightest disobedience. As soon as everyone was lined up, the reception for personal matters began. The officer on duty called out the name. The convict came out of the line, called his data, the article under which he had been sentenced. Afterwards, there was a search for 2 weeks. The entire prison was quarantined. Activists caused problems for the new inmates on a daily basis. In one day, John had to defend himself and stand up for others more than once. Finally, sitting on his bunk, he wistfully remembered his home and his comfortable couch. Not so long ago, everything could have been changed. All he had to do was listen to Betty. Released behind bars, John realized he wanted to send letters to his parents and spouse. The message to his wife was the first. In it he wrote, "My dearest Betty, every day I think of you and miss you. I can't believe I got into this situation, leaving you husbandless for 5 years. I'm sorry I let you down. I was stupid. I didn't appreciate what I had." The answer came a month later, delighted with the letter John received, and immediately began to read it and was speechless from what he saw. Betty wrote, "Hello, John. I have already filed for divorce. I don't intend to take the suit. Burying the family should have been done before you went to jail. Tying my life together with you was a huge mistake of mine, and I'm glad I didn't make a second one by having children with you. I don't need any promises. Just get out of my life forever. I don't need a convict husband. Goodbye." John's hands shook. Dreams crumbled overnight. Life became meaningless. He no longer wanted to leave prison because no one was waiting for him on the outside except his parents. According to the new legislation, first-time offenders do not sit in the same prison as repeat offenders. This greatly reduced the problems between inmates. However, it did not cancel the problems created by the activists. Apparently, he did not like one of them, because of which he was beaten more than once and even ended up in a punishment cell. He thought with annoyance that he would have to endure the mockery of the rat until the end of his term. One day during dinner, John noticed the condition of an elderly criminal mastermind. His lips had turned gray. He was breathing heavily with fumes on his forehead. Forgetting everything in the world, he rushed over to the man and said, "Adam, hello. You are in a pre-infarction state. What are you, a doctor or something?" Immediately, Adam's sidekick stepped in. "Yes, listen to him," Adam said to his family, and then turned to John. "What do you need?" "You two get him into the air," John commanded. Then shouted to the prisoner on duty, "Badly call a doctor and get some nitroglycerin." Adam was saved. Feeling obligated, he sent his men to John to invite him to talk. During the conversation, Adam offered to join his family. Seeing this as a chance to free himself from the beatings of an activist he had grown tired of, he agreed. The rest of his sentence passed quietly and shortly before his release. "What do you plan to do when you're free?" Adam asked him a couple of days before he got out. "I don't know. They won't take me to the, My career as a doctor is over. I'll give you the address of my trusted man. If things get bad, you go to him. He'll give you a job," Adam said, and handed him a piece of paper. "We call him Frank. You tell him it's from Adam and he'll understand. I told him about you." After picking up his papers, John left the prison. Outside the gates, he felt freedom and fear. It was hard to imagine his new life after a criminal record. His parents greeted him with tears and hugs. His loved ones' reactions to his return warmed the soul. It was nice to feel needed by someone again. "I had lost everything." "I'm sorry, Mom," John said, looking his mother in the eyes. "I know, son. I know. Don't worry. You have your father and I. I am so glad that you are with me," he said, hugging his parents. "Let's go to the car." "Eat well," Dad said with a smile. "You can tell us about it." There were several airtight plastic containers of food in the back seat. "Pies, yes," my son smiled. "I see there are salads too. Mom, you don't change. Look how thin you are. I'm not going to feed you just cakes. It won't be enough, my mother said. Eat up. It's been a long time since I've had one of these. John took a salad and, smiling at the smell of it, began to eat it. Yes, it's the food of the gods. God, how I've missed eating real food, he said in a satisfied voice. Bon appetit, wished him his father, and got behind the wheel. It was a long drive. John asked what had happened in the country during those 5 years. Told his parents how happy he was to receive their letters. What's up with the apartment you got after the divorce? Mom asked. You took out a mortgage on it together. Did Betty sue you out of it? I don't know. I'll get some rest and find out. Did you at least get your papers back? Of course they did. What I went to prison with. That's what I came back with. I'll have to get the divorce certificate and the divorce stamp myself. I want to look her in the eye. After all these years, John replied, and felt the resentment of his ex-wife's action awaken inside. No matter how much other inmates comforted him by telling him that wives almost always file for divorce if their husbands are convicted, John could never forgive Betty. To him, family is a union until the end of days, and there are no circumstances a couple can't overcome together. Heard she got married, her mother said. Kind of even had a baby. Maybe we shouldn't talk about it. Dad intervened in the conversation. Why not? John's going to see her anyway, since he's been going to see her for a long time. Yes, we didn't write. We didn't want to upset you, Father said. Well, let her be happy. John will have time to get married too. Who needs me now? Ex. Convict felon. The bride's parents. By the way, when they find out, they won't even talk to me. Oh, cut the crap, said the mother. They don't marry like that, believe me. There'll be a good woman for you. I hope so, sighed John. When he arrived at his parents' apartment after a long journey, he took a deep breath of the familiar smell. He said with a smile, I'm home. Everything around seemed beautiful and new. The couch in the kitchen, the taste of food and drink, the softness of the bed. The latter he rejoiced over like a child. There was no more of the smell or laundry that had accompanied him all 5 years of incarceration. One in tons of sheets. Drawing himself a bubble bath, John climbed into the water with a happy smile, realizing that here was the beauty of freedom. The next morning, out of habit, he woke up early and did his exercises. His parents were still asleep, making himself an eyeful. He ate it with relish and went to Betty's. The keys to the intercom still fit. Once up on the right floor, John saw the new steel door in front of him. Pressing the bell, he stood in front of the peephole waiting for an answer. The door was opened by a big man with a wedding ring on his finger. Good morning. Betty lives here. Hello. Who's asking for her? The stranger asked in a bass voice. Ex-husband. Oops. Betty, your ex-husband showed up. The man shouted at her and told John to come in without standing in the doorway. I'll take the stuff out into the hallway. And the ex-wife came out with the baby in her arms. Hello, she looked down at him and said, get your things and go away. You can't even say anything right away, John asked, feeling the resentment growing. It's been so long since I've seen you. What am I supposed to tell you? Besides the fact that you don't live here anymore. Take your posters and your things, Betty said, and handed them to him. Oh my goodness, didn't throw it away. You hate all this, don't you? Are you glad? The ex-wife raised an eyebrow. What do you take me for? It's your stuff. I'm not burning anything. You'll be screaming your head off. How long have you been married? 3 years. The new husband answered, taking the suitcase out into the corridor. Do you want to go straight away or do you want coffee? But I could use a cup. You will not drink coffee in this house. Get out of here. Screamed the ex. I don't want you here after all I've been through. You've been through? What was it like for me in prison to get that letter? You weren't thinking. John lost his patience. The baby in Betty's arms cried. "Let's not fight, okay?" her husband asked her. "It's all over now. There's no need to reminisce. How could you bring him into our apartment? We chose it together, remember? So what? I was the only one who paid for it. Your salary was enough, except for food and toilet paper. Now go away. What's the point? I was the only one who married you. So many years down the drain. That's how it is." Feeling his soul tearing apart, John left the apartment with his things. His stomach twisted with resentment. He remembered taking out his first ever loan to give Betty a gold engagement ring. He remembered taking part-time jobs to save up for a modest wedding. At the time, he was in his final year of university. How he'd assured his friends that she wasn't really that hysterical. They were against their wedding, saying it wouldn't work out. The friends were right. There was a trash can by the driveway, realizing she would never go back to that house again. John threw away the keys. At lunchtime, he went with his mother to the passport office to get himself registered in his parents' apartment. There was a long line in the room. The looks of people in his direction seemed hostile and suspicious. John sensed that he was seen as an ex-convict, which made him feel out of place. One of the men noticed his middle finger hand, which had a tattoo of a ring, and asked with a sneer, "Did the passport get stolen?" "You watch what you say," John answered him. "Or what? If you want to fight me, I'll teach you some sense. If your parents didn't teach you anything, leave your parents out of this. They had nothing to do with it," said the boy, feeling himself start to buy in. John walked right up to the man. When the passport desk clerk came out into the waiting room and stood between them, the woman's face seemed familiar. "Citizen don't make a scandal out of nothing here," she said. Nobody was robbed. Everybody has their things. If you don't want to stand in line with an ex-con, come back another time. The line agreed and nodded. "Young man," she said to John, "come up to me. I'll take your questions out of turn, as compensation for someone else's insolence." John took a closer look at her and noticed the large scar on her arm. "Pardon me for asking," he said, "but you weren't involved in an accident 5 years ago by any chance?" "Yes, I was." She was surprised. And looking at John closely, she asked, "Are you really the doctor? The one who saved my life, John?" The boy nodded. "Oh my God, I've been looking for you. I wanted Todd. I've been looking for you. I wanted to thank you, but they told me that you no longer work in the ambulance." "That's true. I'm so glad I ran into you after all these years. You know, the surgeon said if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be alive. You wouldn't mind taking me out to dinner so I can thank you just a little bit. I'll pay for it." "I'll do it." "What time?" "The day after tomorrow, in the evening. If you're not busy after 7. We can meet here after work." "All right. What's your name?" "That's right. I forgot, Diane." "A woman." "How many times?" "There's a lady in line who resents me. There are other people here. Are you going to work or what?" "I'm sorry," Diana said, and turned to John again. "What is your question?" When he came out of the passport office with his mother, she elbowed him in the side and said, "Good girl. That's just to thank you." The woman smiled and said, "I can see that she likes you. Believe me, son, my gut has never let me down." As John left the restaurant, he remembered his mother's words with amazement and was glad he had met a woman he felt good and comfortable with. Diane laughed at his jokes, was cheerful, and treated his past work in the air with respect. It was dark outside. Embarrassed, he asked, "Would you mind if I walked you home? I don't want you to think anything bad. It would just make me feel safer." "Of course, I'd be glad to walk with you some more," Diana answered, lowering her gaze. Her phone rang and John heard the familiar music. It was the theme song from his favorite movie. On the display popped up "Son." "Do you know where that tune came from?" he asked, realizing that the ringtone could have been set by a child. "Yes, it's our favorite movie with Max." "I'm sorry. I'll answer it," she told John and said into the phone. Yes, Max, something happened. Hearing the answer made him freeze. What was it, if not a sign of destiny? The wind carried the words of Diana's son through the receiver to John. Daddy's here. Lord, you didn't open the door for him, I hope. Frightened, Diana asked. No, we're not scared. Mom, he's drunk and he's beating the door with his fists. Wait, I'll be right out. Finish the conversation. She told John, I'm sorry, I have to go home right away. I understand, I heard you. You didn't tell me you were married, because I'm divorced. How drunk does your ex get? He comes over all the time. He won't let me rest. What does he want? He wants to come back, but we don't need that drunk. I've already called the police to no avail. I don't know what to do with him. Do you want me to go with you and talk to him? You what? What if you get into a fight? Someone will call the police again and you'll go to jail. For what? If he doesn't press charges, I won't go to jail. I don't know. It's up to you, Diana said excitedly as she hailed a cab. Once outside the entrance, John noticed a drunken blonde man sitting on a bench who looked a little older than himself. When he saw Diane, he turned to her with a complaint. Where have you been going? Why can't I reach you? Because you're blocked. Tom, go away, please. The ex turned his attention to John standing next to Diane and said, You're already dragging some guy into the house. You found my replacement. Go see your son, John told her. We'll have a man-to-man talk. Tom grinned. What are you going to talk to me about? Diana's mine. As soon as the door to the entryway closed behind Diane, John dragged her ex-husband to his jacket and said, All right, look here, I'm not going to tell you twice anymore. You don't go near your ex-wife's house. You don't write. You don't call her. You just pay child support for your son and visit him when you're allowed to. Otherwise, you live your life. Tom tried to punch John, but he ducked, giving Diane's ex a fist to the stomach. He continued, Remember, come again. You risk ending up in the hospital. Do I make myself clear? Understood, said the man, and hurried away. After waiting for Tom to leave, John called Diane and told her, Problem solved. Let's hope he doesn't come around here again. I hope you didn't get into a fight, she asked worriedly. No, he was too drunk for that. Tom was furious. He wasn't ready to give in to Diana and decided to put John in his place for his recent humiliation in order to get back at him. Tom enlisted the help of an acquaintance of his who was connected with crime. He met him by chance, fishing together on the same shore. For a long time, Tom had no idea who he was friends with until a colleague saw them at a picnic. How did you know him? With surprise, he asked Tom. Who? Frank. He's one of the most dangerous men in town. You can't tell by the look of him, but he's like a man. The acquaintances never dragged Tom into their business, never asked for help. They just had a good time and became close when their wives filed for divorce almost at the same time. Frank didn't hold on to his spouse, gave her his due share of the property for her and his son, survived the loss of his family. After that, he moved on with his life. Tom, on the other hand, hoped his wife would return until he received a court summons and has not been able to come to terms with the loss for nearly a year. After hearing that Tom needed to deal with Diane's suitor, Frank invited him to his home. Over a glass of cognac, he listened to his problem and said, There's nothing to it. It's solvable. I think John used to work in the ambulance. He also used to do time. He had a ring on his fist. Good, if the boys are happy, Frank smiled. Do you know where he was? No. Then I'll find out. If he's not a felon, he's done. Satisfied with what he heard, Tom bought some vodka and went home to celebrate his victory. In the evening, he was awakened by the doorbell ringing. By some means getting to the receiver drunk, he pressed the button and opened the door. Belatedly, he realized he was not expecting any guests. He was about to return to the kitchen when he heard the doorbell ring. Who? He asked, trying to see through the peephole standing on the landing. Frank. Open up. The acquaintance stepped over the threshold. in the company of 2 ambassadors. Do you know who you ordered? He asked Tom. No. The boy is like a boy. That's what I thought when I saw him. My guys found out that this John was in the same prison as my boss, and that John saved his life, that Adam had someone on his head for him. Now he even gave him my address in the cachet. What am I supposed to do now? You don't go near your ex. You lay a finger on this John. My boss will stand up for him, tell him to deal with you. And I'll have to come to you and talk to you differently. You got it all figured out. Tom was stunned. This was a turn of events he had never expected. 6 months later, John asked Diana to marry him. As a place, he chose a restaurant where his beloved had invited him for dinner for the first time to thank him. Prepared a speech, rehearsed several times in front of the mirror in the flower store, bought the most beautiful bouquet that was, and went to meet Diane from work. When the food was ordered, John looked into Diane's blue eyes and realized he had forgotten all the words. The only thing he could say was, "Will you marry me? I know I'm not a handsome prince and I don't make much money, but I want to make your life a fairy tale. As much as I can, will you agree to be my wife?" Diana's eyes lit up at what she heard. Yes, of course. Yes. Taking his beloved by the hand, John put a gold ring with a garnet in the shape of a heart on her ring finger. Happy Diane hugged him and kissed him right in the restaurant. "I love you," she said. "And I love you," he replied, smiling. "When do we start planning the wedding? You surprise me. I've never heard of a man taking the initiative in such matters. I can't wait. You're going to take my last name, aren't you?" Diane nodded and asked when we'd tell Max. "Let's do it today, for God's sake. I can't believe it. By the way, about Max. If he doesn't mind, I'd like to give him my last name too." "Are you serious?" He's jumping up and down for joy. "More than once I've been told Uncle John is so cool when I can call him my daddy." Hearing that made John's soul warm. He didn't. Pleased. Diane smiled. "I didn't think a man would come along after my divorce who would love both me and Max. I was afraid he wouldn't get along with my new husband. And not everyone wants to get involved with a woman who has a child." John took her hand. After calculating how much money it would take to have a modest wedding, they started saving together. Working as a veterinarian's assistant and occasionally moonlighting, John himself could barely make ends meet at times. But he didn't give up and kept saving a little bit at a time, asking Diane to take out a loan for the event. His conscience wouldn't let him. He could not take it himself because of his criminal record. Upon learning of the situation, John's parents offered their financial help to the couple as a gift for their wedding. Hugging his mother and father happily, he called his sweetheart and said in a cryptic voice, "Guess who I have good news for?" "For whom?" asked the beloved. Diana's voice alarmed him. "Sweetheart, what's the matter?" "Why are you crying?" John asked. "I'm in the children's hospital. Max lost control, hit a curb, flew off his bike, and broke his leg." "What kind of fracture?" "Closed. Open. Open. With splintering, too. They're taking him in for his first surgery. They say it's better to do this fusion for a fee, if I want Max to walk normally in the future." "John, is it true that without good surgery after an open fracture, they often limp?" Taking a deep breath, he answered, "Unfortunately, yes. Free surgery usually doesn't yield the best results." Hearing these words, Diane burst into more tears. "God, where can I get the money? I don't want my son to be lame. Not for you, but for us. We're almost family. Do you really think I would leave you in a situation like this?" John was on his way to the night shift. He wondered where he could get the missing money for Mac's surgery. Suddenly, on the side of the road not far from his place of work, he noticed barely moving and bloodied a golden-coated dog. It was a Labrador covered in canine pricks. Realizing he wasn't ready to leave the animal without help, John called his veterinarian colleague and asked him to help transfer the animal to our clinic. He examined the dog. His partner said the Labrador had suffered serious injuries due to a stray dog attack on him. We administered all the necessary medications. The wound has been treated. It remains to look after him until the owner comes, said the colleague. Offer to place an ad. The dog has a collar, probably purchased not only for beauty and reinforcement of the leash. Usually expensive dogs wear one with the owner's name and number written on it. Take it off to check it out. John walked over to the sleeping Labrador and followed his partner's advice. The vet was not mistaken. The owner's phone number was written on the inside. Looking at the time, John realized he would call him in the morning. It was unlikely the owner would appreciate such a late call, even if it was his beloved dog. The night shift went very quietly. The guy even managed to take a nap. Toward morning, the Labrador woke up, and with its barking woke up, and with its barking woke up, and with its barking woke up not only the other pets of the clinic, but also John. After doing his chores, he decided to call the dog's owner. "Hello," said a man's voice, speaking. "Good morning. I'm calling about the dog. Have you found my Kai?" The man asked hopefully. "Yes." "Oh my God. I hope you took him to the doctor." "Yes, he is with me now at the vet. I can send you the address. I'll be there. How can I reach you if there's anything? Oliver, what's your name?" "John, nice to meet you." "Wait for me, John. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. John's shift is over. Recently he had been sitting in the cozy office of the veterinary clinic, waiting for the owner of the Labrador. His eyes slid tiredly over the pages of a magazine taken from the lobby, the lines of which his mind was not focused on as John thought about surgery for Max. The only option he could think of was to borrow money from everyone he knew. Otherwise, he would not be able to collect the necessary sum quickly. The door of the clinic swung open. John came out of the office. On the threshold stood a middle-aged man whose face seemed familiar but tired from the night shift. There was no way he could remember exactly where they might have met before. The man was tall and slender with a mustache and hair, much of which had turned gray. When he looked up and saw John, his expression changed. "You?" he asked with surprise. "Looking at the guy, I forgot your name was John." "That's someone I didn't expect to see here." John's anxiety declared. He remembered where he had seen this man and heard his voice. Before him stood Oliver, the father of the very Archie who had put him in jail. The boy tried, with all his might, not to remember the unjust trial that had ruined his marriage and separated him from his family for 5 years. But now confronted face to face with Oliver, all the memories came to the surface of his mind. "Are you after the dog, Oliver?" he asked, trying not to betray his bitter feelings. "You remember my name," he grinned. "I have remembered after all these years. I've been thinking about you, too, waiting for a new claim." John asked him tensely. "Why? If Wilson and I hadn't put you away, our children might be alive now," he answered, and cried. This turn in the conversation made the boy confused. Oliver took a handkerchief out of his pocket, wiped his face, and continued. They had crashed after all. Then they both got drunk and raced the police in the cars we'd given them, going over 100 at least. They didn't make the turn. Death was instant horror. John's eyes widened. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said sincerely. "Don't be. We deserved it. When they put you away, they took such a sin on our souls for the sake of our sons. You must have taught Oliver a lesson then, making him not to be arrogant and respect others. Wilson and I didn't get it. A long time ago, tragedy struck. A year after the trial to me, Archie gave me his last birthday present. After my son died, he was all I had left. My wife didn't get over the grief. She left after Archie. Oliver burst into tears and wiped away his tears with a handkerchief. Asked, "Where is he, by the way?" "Can I take him out now?" John answered. Returning the dog, he said what medications the Labrador would need. Oliver bought them at the pharmacy, which was located here in the clinic. Then he asked, "Did you save him?" John nodded. "Like my son, you're a good man. But it's no use." I lost my wife, my job, several years of my life. Now everything seems to be getting better. I was thinking about getting married, but my fiancé's son had severely injured his leg. I need a paid surgery, which I can't afford on my meager salary. After a while, Oliver offered, "I'll help you. I owe you a lot of money for everything. How much do you need?" John gave a number. The interlocutor took out his smartphone, asked for the card number, and made the transfer. "Thank you, Oliver. Very helpful." "Thank you. Saved my last bit of joy after my son died. I'll talk to Wilson about helping you redeem yourself a little. I hear you used to be a good doctor. Get him to set you up." "You think he'll agree to help?" "He agreed to ruin his life. If he refuses to rebuild it, he'll lose respect in my eyes. You need to right your wrongs." The man and the dog left, leaving John in deep surprise. The smartphone made a short beep. A new message came in. He looked at the screen. It was a notification of a transfer Oliver had made to his account. A week after this conversation, John received a call from the head doctor's private clinic, who invited him for an interview. Unable to contain his own joy, he called his fiancée during lunch and asked, "Hi, honey. Don't get distracted. I'm at lunch. What do you want?" "I've got news." Attorney Wilson did listen to Oliver. "I got a call from Avicenna, the head doctor, asking me to come in for an interview." "Oh, wow. They're really going to take you on with the judgment?" "We'll know in a couple of days." "I've got news for you, too," Diane shared. Max's latest surgery went well. The head doctor of the private clinic Avicenna called Kevin. During the interview, he honestly admitted to John that he had called the ear and asked about him as a doctor. "John, you have an impeccable reputation. Minimal complaints from patients. No censure from superiors. Outstanding results. How will you prove your credentials? I will be glad to see you on the list of doctors in our clinic, and my colleagues will not be embarrassed by my past. 1, they won't know about it, and 2, Wilson himself vouched for you. He's never once let us down when he's asked for a job for someone else." "How often does he call you, if it's no secret?" "This is the 3rd time. He's given us 2 top-tier doctors, including the city's only anthropologist. That's a rare specialist. We didn't have them before. Nugget moved here a couple of years ago. I don't think he'll disappoint us either. I'll do my best." After 3 months at the clinic, John felt his life was finally on the right track. He became a respected physician and a favorite of his co-workers. Patients signed up with him months in advance, making his salary increase every month. In addition to professional growth, he had other plans: to marry Diana. His steadily increasing income allowed him to do so without a wedding loan and to save up the necessary sum in 6 months. The couple began preparations. Diana chose a beautiful country estate surrounded by nature as the venue for the celebration. It was decided to put the tables under a white canopy. John chose a silver men's suit with black field, jacket lapel, and a silver bow tie. It was exciting to get married a second time, but he knew he wanted to. During the celebration, the bride and groom did not sing. Puzzled by this behavior, the guests furtively asked John, "Why didn't you even buy champagne? We're planning a baby." Diana strictly adhering to what the doctor said. "So am I. It's been 6 months since we've both been sober." "Well, what did his mate say when he raised his glass?" "I believe in you. Almost a month has passed since that magical day." Coming back to work from a vacation he was taking to relax with Diane and Max at the seaside. After the wedding, John was about to have coffee with a colleague. "Hello, sweetheart," he said. "Is something wrong, or are you just here to talk? I have good news for you, I hope." "I don't know. It depends on whether you want to be a father or not," said the spouse with a smile. "From what I've heard." John stood still for a few seconds and then asked excitedly, "Are you pregnant?" "Yes, I am. Congratulations, Daddy." Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.